Sessions Cafe with your host, Keri D. Singleton.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sessions Cafe. I'm your host, Keri D. Singleton, and today we have the pleasure of welcoming Jason Ponterotto to the show. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you, man.
Go Knicks.
Yep.
Love
Knicks
the
all
shirt.
day.
We're
Thank you, man.
celebrating their championship win until the next season.
Yes.
When hopefully we'll get another one.
We will.
Exactly, we will. Just keep the faith. That's all I keep saying. You and I are both members of the New York Association of Black Journalists. It's a position that is really, really important to me. I'm a new member. I know you've been with the association for a while. Talk to me about your life in journalism. We can just start from there.
For sure, man. I've always had a passion for journalism throughout my life. I knew since I was young that I wanted to get into journalism. Since I really knew what it was, I remember, 8, 9, learning about journalism, because I always knew I had a talent for writing and had a love of history. Right. So, and I was also passionate about a lot of issues and things in the world. So, and I was passionate about informing and educating, fellow members of society, because I always knew that there was a lot of, disconnect in terms of what people understood. And so I learned about journalism and how it was such a awesome, vehicle for informing the public and, highlighting important issues, because I've always been very race conscious as well. And so, I wrote for the school paper for a little bit in high school, but it wasn't until undergrad at Howard that I really started to, really delve and get my feet wet in terms of journalism.
Okay.
I wrote for the Hilltop, which is the oldest black collegiate newspaper. I was a news and politics staff writer.
Now that was at Howard University.
Howard University,
okay, in
HU.
DC. Yeah, beautiful,
Yep.
beautiful.
So I wrote for that paper and, got so much experience there. Also was a member of the Howard chapter of NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists.
Oh, wow,
Yep,
okay.
Yep. And I was a member for most of my time at Howard, but I was a community service chair in my senior year. So,
That's dope,
those networking, that network is always important as black journalists. I think a lot of, you were transparent saying you're a new member, but I always feel like but at least you're a member, you know what I mean? Because I always feel like to think about all the black journalists, not even just in New York, the capital of media, but, everywhere in the country that might not be aware of or connected with this kind of network and resource. Right. And it's like, this really is NABJ. It really is an important resource and network to have. And I'm honored to be a member. I've only been a member of the New York chapter for a few years, but I've gotten to know a lot of the members, and it's such a great, helpful, supportive tool. And have you been to the NABJ convention?
Not yet. As I said, I just joined
Okay.
in May, so I'm brand new, like a little bit more than a month out. But I wanted to ask you before you go too far into your story, what inspired you to become a member of the New York Association of Black Journalists? I mean, I understand that you were a chapter member at Howard, but taking the next step to actually become a member here in New York City, what inspired you
Absolutely.
To make that move?
Most definitely. And I think it's interesting because, I was always, I had known about the national chapter. Through college was my introduction to NABJ. But I had always known a little bit about the New York chapter, but it felt like there was some kind of veil there at points. I remember trying to look on the website and, not really, you know what I'm saying? But you would think, okay, New York City, the capital of media, it should be a little bit more easy to,
navigate.
And the chapter would be a little more visible, I would imagine. Maybe I just wasn't looking in the right places, because the chapter is, very historic. And once I actually became a member, there's so much awesome things going on, and, it's been a real pleasure. But I knew, after graduating and coming back home to New York, that I had to be connected with that network. So I joined the NYABJ and and through that as well, I was able to, you know, get more involved in terms of the convention and NABJ overall.
So what has being a member of the New York Association of Black Journalists? This is a tongue twister for me all the time. I'm going to keep it real.
Yeah.
What is it? What has that afforded you? And again, don't say too much because I got a lot of questions to ask.
For sure.
But what has that afforded you in terms of your journalism journey?
Yes, I would say, you know, the greatest thing, and I'm sure you're experiencing it now in terms of the meetings that we've had, the few meetings that we've had so far this quarter. Just the network is so important, and you know, can't be, you know, overstated enough, because networking and connecting with folks is really the main thing in journalism. When people, you know, drive into, you know, our heads since in school, and you know, it kind of makes me sad sometimes when I talk to some journalists that don't understand that it's really about, you know, expanding your network and your community of black journalists that you know, because they're going to be the ones to, you know, refer you or to let you know about this potential project, or, you know, connect you with these kind of folks
and be in those important circles.
Absolutely.
It's about being in those circles
for sure. So I would say definitely just getting to know a lot of great members. You know, there are a lot of members of, you know, prominent, a lot of folks who are on TV and doing a lot of great things, but they don't always get to go to all the meetings, for instance, because they're, you know,
busy.
They're big names or whatever, but you're still technically all under one group and one umbrella. So, you know, just that network is so important, and, you know, you get to connect with folks that have been in the industry for 30, 40, 50 years and learn from them. So I would say that definitely has been the best thing that I've you know, collected from being a member.
So let's talk about your background.
Okay.
You're from New York City.
Yes.
What part of the city are you originally from?
I'm originally from born and raised, well, not born, but Riverdale in the Bronx.
Okay.
Riverdale is like northwest section of the Bronx. It's not typically what, you know,
most people
might associate with the Bronx. And understandably, you know, but it was a really beautiful experience to live there, and I definitely don't take it for granted, because you know, my mother, infectious disease specialist, PA doctor in Harlem, where she grew up. So, you know, my father retired from the post service. So, you know, we were able to live in a nice area, but I was always connected, you know, to Harlem growing up. It was always my second home. My church is there.
The best of both worlds.
Absolutely. And I think that's what it's about. Because if you get too, you know, sort of consumed into one sort of cultural upbringing, then you're missing out. You know what I mean? So, because we mentioned Alfonso Ribeiro, who's also from Riverdale. Riverdale, so for those that don't know, is actually a very, very well-heeled section of the Bronx. For sure.
I lived in the Bronx myself for a couple of years, many years ago, and I remember seeing in some post, some people used to put Riverdale, New York, as opposed to Bronx, New York, to separate themselves from the Bronx, because the Bronx, of course, has a reputation of being gritty and hard-nosed and rough, whereas Riverdale is just totally the opposite. That type of a neighborhood. And then, of course, Harlem is very soulful and has a lot of history and grit as well. So you were able to navigate between life in Riverdale, which again is an upper echelon type of area, and then life in more soulful blue-collar Harlem.
Absolutely. And I would want to touch on that. You know, we definitely weren't wealthy. You know, we had a really nice, always lived in nice areas and stuff, but it's not like we had huge houses or anything. Like that.
But it's very different from the rest of the Bronx.
Absolutely. And I definitely, you know, don't take that for granted, for sure, because as you said, you get the best of both worlds. I was able to live in a more quiet, less sort of chaotic, for lack of a better way of describing it, sort of area section. And then it's geographically, you know, it's really convenient because you have the one train down and you just have access to the rest of the city through the one train. And so, but yeah, also, actually I forgot my train of thought. But
well, let me just say this too. And we won't expand too much on this, but I did want to point this out. So you're biracial.
Yeah, I am.
What was it like growing up in a biracial household? Which parent? One parent is Italian.
Yeah, my father.
And your mother is African American.
Yes.
So what was that like? What was that dynamic like? If you could give me a couple of minutes, briefly summarize what that was like for you, just in the home and outside the home.
And I think that's a really, unique and cool kind of discussion, because, I think a lot of different young people that grow up biracial, different experiences depending on like who's in the house and where you grew up, and a lot of people, think even beyond just mixed race people, a lot of sort of just generalizing about people just in general. So I would say I had two loving parents that were always very, involved. My father was stay at home, while my mother, killed it as a doctor out, and was just an incredible role model. Both of them were incredible role models. My dad, very smart. He is Italian, but he was like rolling with Black Panthers, and he was a part of that. Grew up in the '60s. He was always very knowledgeable. So and it's funny because my mother is a little bit more, in some ways, I don't want to say, I guess just not coddled, but little. My dad, I would say, is a little bit more the gritty one.
Okay. She is.
Even though she grew up in Harlem, but she has all that knowledge and love of her people that she puts into her work. So that's what I, got from her as well.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty gritty. What was the food like?
I love that question, but I love that question for sure.
Your dad's Italian, and you're eating the best lasagna, and then your mother's making the best fried chicken. What was that like, brother?
It's funny, man. Yeah, because it was such a a blessing. You had always have that beautiful memory of Sunday soul food dinners. It wasn't that common, but it was on occasion.
Right.
And my mom, obviously, the way she would cook up, chef up breakfast.
Did Dad make a good lasagna?
Yeah, I'm gonna get to my part. But my mom, she has her touch. She would say she's not the best of her sisters in terms of cooking, but nothing like Mama's cooking.
Okay,
so
I know that's right.
Techniques I always take from my mom's cooking.
Yeah.
But yeah, she doesn't cook as much, but my dad, he was always the main chef of the household. Italian food, but he would his palate for cooking was a lot of different cuisines, but he definitely knew how to get down from Italian mother, growing up in the Bronx, all those little things that he picked up on and that he passed down. So a lot of beautiful dishes. The spaghetti and meatballs is unlike anything else.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And it's funny because you see like how different people prepare different Italian dishes, and it's like just doesn't quite taste the same or as good. You know what I mean? So for me, as someone who is a chef in my own right, in some respect, a lot of I make my way around the kitchen.
You know your way around.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I bake a little too, but
you got a great background. Okay, so
I take a lot of both my parents in terms of the cooking.
The cooking. Okay, we're gonna navigate a little bit from the food. Just a little bit for a second. We have 1 minute. Okay, and I want to talk about how growing up in a biracial environment was instrumental in you deciding to go to Howard. And again, we only have a couple of seconds, before we go to break.
No problem.
How did that influence your decision to go to an HBCU?
Beautiful question. So I would say I was always, like I said, always race conscious. I was always passionate about issues of racial justice.
Okay.
I would even get folks saying, "Oh, he's the pro-black dude in junior high and high school." I went to Mount St. Michael, so a lot of Black and Latino students.
Okay.
But and I started the Black Student Union at my first college of Mount St. Vincent, before I transferred to Howard University in 2019, because I knew that Howard was going to be the place
that you wanted
to really get all I needed to really be a strong Black journalist, learn from Black educators, get that campus culture, and so that was really, I was always very determined in that respect. So I knew that was going to be my journey. But to be frank, I think I was being a little bit safe initially. I was thinking, I was asking like, what are your Black Student Union kind of organizations like at my first school? But ultimately, I revitalized the organization. But ultimately, I realized I needed to be at a HBCU after a couple years. So, that was, and Howard was the greatest decision I could make. Yeah.
Howard University.
HU.
Okay. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back after this. And And we're back with my brother Jason Ponterotto. So listen, growing up in Boston, it was my dream to be a journalist, and I wanted to be a journalist in New York City, and specifically for the Amsterdam News. The Amsterdam News is a historic African-American newspaper, and it's based in Harlem, and that's what, at least when I was in my 20s, I wanted to write for the Amsterdam News. You have accomplished my goal. You stole it. I'm just kidding. But you and I met at an event for the New York Association of Black Journalists, and I remember you us connecting and exchanging information, and you telling me that you worked for the Amsterdam News. And when you did, my entire focus on whatever was going on in the room was like right on that guy. So how did you get the gig at the Amsterdam News? What do you do for the Amsterdam News, and what's it been like, working with so many great journalists in that historic newspaper?
Following my senior year at Howard, I interned with the Amsterdam News.
Oh, okay.
So I was editorial intern summer of 2023. And so currently I'm a freelance contributor, but I work with the paper throughout the week. I do a lot of the Black New Yorker column.
Okay,
so
I'm familiar.
my editor Madison Joe Gray, who just took over the job last year, me and him talk regularly about different stories, and so I always have to have the Black New Yorker each week, and that's such an incredible sort of column to write for, because with the Black New Yorker column, it's been around for many years. It's all about highlighting Black New Yorkers. Even yourself, brother, you could be Black New Yorker, and that I highlight, because it's all about highlighting Black New Yorkers doing. I got you, brother. I got
Make
you.
that happen, then, brother.
For sure.
Yeah,
Keri, Singleton, for sure. But yeah, it's all about highlighting Black New Yorkers doing important work, interesting things, and just sharing their story. And
that's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, but as a freelance contributor, I also. It's not exclusively that. I get to work with other reporters for different kinds of stories, and I like to say I cover politics, education, business, public affairs, things happening in the community, public affairs, all with the intersection of inequality, because that's the root of my journalism and the work that I want to do. So and even through the Black New Yorker, I get to touch into that a lot of times. So that's what I do with Amsterdam.
Let me ask you a question. To date, right? How old are you?
28.
Okay. Wow. My God. It's a
a
baby.
older.
28 years old. You work in such a historic space.
Absolutely.
What has thus far in your 28 years been the apex of your experience as a young journalist?
That's a really good question. I think going to Howard University, learning from seasoned Black journalists and educators who have been in the industry, seen everything, know what us as young Black journalists would have to deal with, hearing their advice, getting training from them, and really learning about the rich legacy of the Black press, and always keeping that in mind has always been really at the forefront of my work and my role as a journalist. I always keep that in mind, because we are the voices for our people, and really staying on top of things that mainstream just won't cover a lot of times, that are just brushed past. So we have such a critical role. So just having the opportunity to tell our stories and really delve deep, that's always been the driving passion for me, and what I just enjoy throughout the week, whether it's a short story, 500 or so words, or a long form piece. That's what's really enjoyable. But more specifically, I'll say last September I had my first solo cover story.
Wow!
And
congratulations, brother.
Thank you so much. And in doing that, the story, I was able to touch on a lot of those things that are personal to me. It was a story about the first HBCU early college prep high school that opened up in New York.
Okay. Wow.
And so I got to talk about the trailblazing principal, Dr. Asia Johnson, in that story, highlight her, talk to the students, talk about the historical significance of the school, but yeah, it's just to have that that story as the cover story, and I got to appear on Pix 11 to talk about it. Was to have that story in particular that I was so proud of,
so cool.
Be my first cover story, something I was really proud of.
That is so cool. You have a real deep interest in exploring race and culture. Where does that come from?
You know, man, I would say, you know, I've always, Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, all these figures that have inspired, you know, so many black men and women growing up. If, you know, your parents are fortunate enough to pass it down to you. But a lot of times, and this was my experience too, my mother definitely really, you know, taught us about our black history, you know, sat down with us, you know, reading through books and things like that, and always connected us to Harlem. So I had that, but particularly a lot of us of a certain generation, if we really are passionate about it or care about it, we'll do our own sort of research and stuff through the internet and really get to hear from these legends and hear their speeches. And so, you know, growing up, that was always a big inspiration for me, hearing, you know, all these different figures. And then really at Howard, I have to always shout out Dr. Greg Carr, you know, minoring in Black Studies, Africana Studies, and, you know, learning, really expanding that sort of lens and perspective on a global level in terms of connecting, you know, all these things that we today, when you look at, you know, the current administration or, you know, the kinds of wacky, crazy things that people are doing these days, when you put it in context, you know, you realize that we really as a people have, you know, dealt with this, and a lot of times our history is so narrowly taught, and it's very deliberate, but we don't, a lot of times we're not taught the greatness of our people, and in terms of, we always were pushing forward for us and had our own institutions and doing these things. And even with, you know, not to get too deep into it, but like they'll have a very narrow sort of narration about Dr. King and make it seem like he just wanted, you know, just, you know, sort of integration just for the sake of integration. But he was always talking about, yes, we need integration, but it was about, you know, us not being cut off from the resources that were available. And of course, you know, we as a people, all of us human beings should love each other, but it wasn't just, you know, a very narrow sort of, you know, lens about it. People like to pit Malcolm X and Dr. King together, but they were far more aligned than a lot of people realize.
Separate.
But that's the risk when you only, you know, aren't being taught from, you know, our educators and learning from our people directly. So I always say young black people should go to HBCUs, and so yeah. But that knowledge always inspired and drove. So that intersection of Africana studies and discussing and our people with journalism is what really formed, you know, the work that I do. So that always was passionate. Yeah.
And that fueled your love for exploring race and culture, because in this country, I mean, it's such a, unfortunately, it's such a touchy subject. It shouldn't be. I mean, you know, but I mean, there's certainly reasons for that. As we close out, I wanted to ask you a pretty interesting question. I'll put it to you that way.
I like interesting questions.
What are your thoughts on the state of black people in the United States and abroad today?
Very, very
and I ask you this from the perspective of a young journalist who was studied at an HBCU, who comes from a biracial home. There's a lot of interesting ingredients that go into who you are as a person. And I wanted to hear your opinion on the state of black people in the U.S. and abroad, Brazil, Africa,
absolutely,
etc.
Because we're all connected always.
Yeah. What's your opinion
absolutely,
on
and
What's
as
your
you say that, for sure. You know, and Dr. Greg Carr, who I learned from, I always love how he frames it. You know, that we're all family, we're all connected through our brothers and sisters throughout the diaspora, and it's really, we should not let these artificial lines, as he says, you know, allow us to, you know, I'm Black American and you're Caribbean or African, so you're different. When all those sorts of, you know, and of course we always have to, you know, respect and understand that there are, you know, different experiences in terms of, you know, where us as a people, you know, where we were situated.
Correct.
So you have to recognize that and understand that.
Yeah, because culturally we're going to be different.
Of course, absolutely.
There's no getting around that.
But when you, but unfortunately a lot of people get in that divisive trap of, you know, otherizing other folks and saying, you know, forgetting the fact that, you know, we are brothers and sisters, and you know, losing sight of that. And that's exactly what Malcolm X and Dr. King and so many folks fought against, that we didn't let those sorts of things cloud our judgment, because that's really the tools of white supremacy at work. When you don't realize you have your allies across across
Oceans.
different oceans,
Right.
in different countries, then you think it's all just you, and you don't realize that there's other partners and a playbook there that you can look to and learn from.
But I don't mean to interrupt you, but let's not forget that there's a disconnect within this country, within African Americans,
100%,
all of whom, those who I'm referring to, were born here. So it's not just about divisiveness between Africans from West Africa, for example, versus those that live in the States, versus those that live in the Caribbean, versus those that live in other parts of the world like Australia. There's a lot of divisiveness here within this nation's borders.
100%,
and not just based on politics. It's, again, rural versus urban, and east versus west. We have almost a obsession, it seems, with self-division. Why do you think that is? We have very little time.
No, absolutely. It's really just the tools of white supremacy. We're cut off from understanding that we have had incredible leaders that have given us the blueprint, but we might not know everything about them, for instance, or we're deliberately not taught our history. And Roland Martin, in terms of as a black journalist for myself, he really is the true blueprint, I would say, in a lot of ways, as far as doing that work, as far as connecting history, but also fervently staying on top of the issues that affect us as black people. So he really makes sure that we are educated on what's going on. So as a black journalist, doing that kind of work is what my best, and continuing in the rich lineage and legacy of black journalists like I.W. Wells and so many others. And speaking and to do that with the Amsterdam News, such a long legacy of doing that work. Malcolm X wrote for them, obviously. That really is an honor for me, and I just want to continue to, because the work will never end. As you know. So I just, whatever ways that I can continue in that role, in terms of helping our people, that's what my work is, and that's what I'll focus on. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad to have met you.
Thank you, brother.
I'm glad to be in such great company at the NYABJ, and I'm glad that you were able to stop by and share so much of your wisdom, both as a journalist and as a young person who clearly has a lot of knowledge on global relations, and I appreciate that.
Nah, I appreciate you, man. Thank you, man.
Go Knicks.
Yep, Knicks all day.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Sessions Cafe with your host, Keri D. Singleton.